was there a key point where you thought that the other self-defense systems you've probably been learning maybe in martial arts and whatnot, that they weren't going to cut it? Did something actually happen, or was
Yeah,
it just
there
sort
was
of
several, and yeah, like you've opened up a can of worms, because this is one of my pet peeves about the industry. But I had a few light bulb moments, and if I turn back the clock, one thing about me is I must have a face that people want to punch, which I'm cool with. People are welcome to. But as well as that too, I don't think people appreciate being told the truth or bluntness, and sometimes I've done that and it's upset some people. So I've been in quite a few encounters based on that. But I had this one big. We were involved in an all-in brawl at a basketball game where it was ridiculous. And
it all happens at a basketball game. Kids basketball.
Like,
any basketball.
That's crazy. But yeah, so there's this one moment where at the time, like, I was a really decorated kickboxer. I was like, people used to come up after fights and go, "I love your technique's, impeccable," and all this kind of stuff. And I'd be like, yeah. And I got into this fight and it looked nothing like it. And one of the big things was, I always trained as a southpaw, but I'm naturally orthodox. I'm kind of a bit ambidextrous, but all my training, and people talk about muscle memory, is from a left-handed stance. And then every time I got into an encounter, I went to a right-handed stance. And so it was kind of like everything I did well, not everything, but the vast majority of everything I did in training wouldn't appear in that environment, in that context. So that got me thinking, that got me on the path of, the reality-based self-defense, systems. And then, so that was one moment. After that, I started teaching Krav, after I became an instructor. For about 18 months, I taught it by the book, how I was taught it, and I sort of put aside everything else that I would do. And I found that 18 months in, like some of the guys who had been training for that entire 18 months, we do certain drills and they'd fail at. And I'd be like, we drill that, and we drill that really, really well. Why isn't it working? So then we drill it even harder, like probably everyone would. We'd sit there and go, we're not good enough, let's do it harder. And then we'd do it again, and same results. And then I kind of stopped and I thought to myself, well, maybe it's not us, maybe it's the techniques, but how dare I question, something that was designed by the Israeli Special Forces, like, who's this guy, kind of thing. But the truth was, within that system, with all systems, those particular techniques have drills that you use to train them that are designed to make them work. Whereas what I try and do is design drills to make them fail. And a friend of mine, Matt McLeod, who's one of my, my partner in crime in all of this, he used to say to me, we're not trying to prove what we do right, we're trying to prove it wrong. And that sort of resonates with me, in that instead of limiting the drills and saying you must do this, that and the other, I would just say, if it's to stab someone, just stick that knife into them. I wouldn't tell them how, I wouldn't give them any instruction. And when it was open-ended like that, as opposed to a closed drill, it all failed. And that's where I started to reassess it all and drew from other sources. And then the other thing that we do here that's kind of unique is we have this fight night every year called King of the West, where it's a 20-second fight, all out. We do it, we might do it in an office, we've done it on a bridge, we've done it all these kind of places. Primarily, it's not to try and for cool factor. It's my job to invoke a little bit of adrenaline, invoke a little bit of fear in them, so then real self-defense techniques come out. Because in martial arts, there's control. You're in control at that time. In self-defense, you're not necessarily in control. Like, there's all this processing going on, is this really happening to me? All these kinds of things, and you have to flip that switch and get into it. And even though that the drills that I did, like, they kind of were down that path, they still weren't there enough. So I try and scare people. So you have these 20-second fights, and 90% of what we did in class didn't show out. Or maybe not 90%, maybe, more than 70% didn't turn up. So rather than sit there and go, this 70% isn't good enough, we'd look at that 30% and go, well, this is where our focus needs to be. And it's the same we do the same thing with knives as well. Like, we had a knife day which was similar, where we stack the odds against the person defending. It's really, really tough. And the person attacking can do what they want. They can kick, stab, whatever. And you just see the success just drops. And people don't realise that if you dial back the intensity, it just becomes miles easier. It becomes so much easier. And people don't understand that. Like, Tristan saw this guy on one of the forums was sort of criticising what we do, saying that what he does was better. And I just said, show us a video of what, you doing it better. I'm always happy to learn. And our intensity was here and his was not even in the ballpark. So it's just like your opinion doesn't matter because you haven't taken it there. Sorry?
It's like driving in a car park or driving in a racetrack.
Yeah.
With 20 other people on it trying to get to the line first. It's a completely different level of intensity.
Yeah, and it changes everything that you can do. And so we sit there and we concentrate on that little 30% because as an instructor, like, I wish this wasn't the case because I could write a syllabus that taught 1,000 techniques and we could teach it over 3 years and I wouldn't have to be creative to come up with good drills to make people better. It'd be so much easier. But instead we were just like, no, it doesn't work. And it just kept this process of elimination that we're left with this tiny thing. But within this tiny thing, if you study that effectively, it becomes big. Like just a punch, like, most people spend a day on it, but it takes a lifetime to get it better, to get it right, and that's kind of how it came from. And like, I just sit there and it does my head in that people argue and they've never taken it to that place. I just think, where's your integrity that you're telling these people that this works, but you don't know? And I'm not saying, and most instructors out there haven't done a pistol disarm, haven't had someone try and stab them. A couple have, and I guarantee you the ones that have, what they did looked nothing like what they do in training. It was more sheer luck. So I kind of, we have a motto, and this is like, how you have on your school crest. Like I remember at school, mine was truth through learning. We have truth through combat because, it's about finding the truth. Like I'd feel bad if my guys went out and did something that I showed them and they got hurt. Like that's...
Absolutely, yeah.
I think that's one of the biggest things that attracts me to watching your information that you put out and everything like that, and the way you go about it is that search for honesty, but also the fact that you almost enjoy finding fault and then working towards another outcome where, to be perfectly honest, not wishing to offend anyone, but a lot of the instructors in traditional martial arts are anything but that. They're completely offended when fault's found and they don't even want to look at it. It's an indoctrinated system. This is the way it's done. This is the way we're doing it. And you don't get to ask questions about it.
Yeah.
So from my advice to people out there looking for a good system, martial art, combative type place to go and train at, look for people like Jeff that are, their documents live. And you could almost, if you took a snapshot every 6 months of what he's teaching, it will be slightly different every 6 months because it's always chipping away at that rough diamond, trying to refine it and get to the closest you can to an honest sort of answer and a truthful sort of response.
Yeah, that's it. And it's about letting go. That's one of the hardest things people tend to do. They've been training in a style for 20 years and it's really hard to push that. I say it's like religion, like once you're born into it, you live it, breathe it, it's hard to let go, and it's hard to change someone's beliefs. It's kind of, I used to think we were like the hippies of the combatives world for a time there because we were so vague and people would come in and I'd be going, we're searching for truths, and it was a little bit, like they were half expecting there to be a circle of people smoking, which is not the case at all. Like, you know what I mean? But we were kind of a bit vague because that's the way it has to be. Like I always say to people, this is like a choose your own adventure story to some extent. Like I take you 2/3 of the way maybe. The last third is dependent on what you can do and what you like to do and your preferences and things like that. That's another big issue with martial arts is the cloning. So they have an instructor up the front who may be wonderful and they try and make everyone do the exact same thing and it's not possible. It's absolutely not possible. I have people that in my gym that do all kinds of things that I could never do and vice versa. So we find our own path, and again that's that hippiness sort of coming